Hello, everyone. My name is Douglas Brown. Welcome to the Bowery Poetry Workshops. Today, I am going to talk to you about Zuihitsu. I'm supposed to be teaching right now, and so I did this little recording so no one gets put on blast here. I am the author of two books, Zero to Three and Icon. Icon is my most recent book, and it really looks at Frederick Douglass. And I was stuck in writing this book, and I came across a workshop. I was lucky to do the Kundiman workshop, and where I met Kimiko Han, and she taught us how to do Zuihitsu. So that's the basis of this workshop here. Why Zuihitsu? Well, if you're like me, sometimes writing doesn't happen, and sometimes you need to do other things like live, change the baby. I have a 2-year old, and writing just doesn't happen. Or, if like me, sometimes you want to add extra dimension to your writing and look at it in different ways as much as possible. Or maybe you've been away from a project because you're working on something else and you really want to jumpstart that project. Well, I think Zuihitsu is great for that. What I found out was that Zuihitsu was really helpful for me to research. As I said, my second book was on Frederick Douglass, and he is quite a magnanimous figure and a lot of research. And what I found out was that in my attempt to interrogate either Douglass or myself, it just wasn't happening because doing all of the research, I was finding myself writing like a nonfiction book, and that's not what I was doing. I was trying to write a poem, and so Zuihitsu helped reimagine the history and help me take the research and become more creative with that and the history. And also, Zuihitsus really help spark creativity. They really help I always tell my students, help me go off road to get back on track of everything that I'm doing here. Let's close that. So, today, Zuihitsu. Zuihitsu means running brush, and it's really a way to take notes. So I just want to make sure you understand that the idea of Zuihitsu is not to write a poem per se, but it's really a way to be random. Okay, this idea of running brush, and so what we know is that Zuihitsu started with the Japanese poet Shishanagan, who was writing about the court life in Japan, and wasn't supposed to do that. And it was forbidden for women to write, in particular, about the daily happenings that were occurring in the court, and it was definitely forbidden to share any of that. And so she kept these things secret, and they were discovered, and a book was published called Pillow Talk that featured these Zuihitsus. And what we see from Shishanagan is that you get this wonderful glimpse of recorded life, of Japanese life from her musings. And I learned from the poet Kimiko Han, and Kimiko was great helping us understand what Shishanagan was doing and really helping us break it down and helping us to break down our Zuihitsu. So what Kimiko taught us was to take a piece like this. This is from Shishanagan. You see there are 3 different paragraphs, but if you read it carefully, you will see and hear how each one is different. Let me read it to you really quickly. The joy of randomness. Number 13, depressing things. A dog howling in the daytime, a red plum blossom dress in the 3rd or 4th months, a lying in room when the baby has died, a cold, empty brazier, an ox driver who hates his oxen, a scholar whose wife has one girl child after another. A letter arrives from the provinces, but no gift accompanies it. It would be bad enough if each letter reached one in the provinces from someone in the capital, but then at least it would have been interesting news about going ons in society, and that would be a consolation. One has said a friend a verse that turned out fairly well. How depressing when there is no reply poem. Even in the case of love poems, people should at least answer that they were moved at receiving the message or something of the sort. Otherwise, they will cause the keenest disappointment. And so, if we look at this, what Kamiko was really helpful is having us not so much analyze the piece, because you could see with the three paragraphs, the way it moves, all of it is seemingly disjointed, and it goes back to the theme of depressing things. And so what Kamiko would have us look at it and would try to make categories, these general categories. So it's almost like you're stepping back from a writing, you're starting in this real general place, and then you would come back and add specificity. And so if we were to categorize this, the way I would look at it was, we see a short line. We see a short visual line. We see something that comes out of the blue as elegant. We see something then tragic that kind of halts us. And then a sensation. And then a surreal line. Here are the different categories that I came up with. You could come up with some other ones on your own. I like to ask to see how this second paragraph might be an opinion or some kind of subjective truth. Maybe you could think about that for a second. I see it as subjective because it's different from the first paragraph that has these random sentences. And now we have one paragraph that's kind of working in a traditional way a paragraph works, right? Or everything is on the same subject. But it has this subtle way to tell us their opinion, to tell of Shoshanagan's feelings about it. And it's a real subtle feeling about things, but it is definitely judgmental. It would be bad enough if such a letter reached in the provinces from someone in the capital, but at least it would be interesting news, right? I like that. And one of the things that Kamiko was big on telling us to do is to add snark, to be a little snarky in your Zuihitsus. And then I'm going to let you find the category for the third paragraph. And really, again, try to be random and thinking about randomness. And here is a list of categories that I have come up with, not so much for the third paragraph, but just in looking at this and things that I've wanted to look at, things that are important when I was trying to do a writing project. They're very helpful to have these kind of categories. And what I'm going to suggest is that you might want to keep these categories, make your own, explore different ways to look at a piece or of art or just life in general. I would add joy as a category. I would add affirmation as a category, and so on and so on. My students always ask me, well, what's a list in a list? A list in a list is like a recipe is a list in a list. And a recipe almost works like a Zuihitsu, where you have these ingredients that it tells you what to do, and sometimes there's a narrative with it. So a recipe, looking at a recipe is a really helpful way to think about listing the list. I am big on short and including short in any time I do a Zuihitsu because it's very important for me. Sometimes I write these lines that are way too long, and I just need to say, well, you need to write something short here. Let's practice this though. All right, to do this, what is important is that you have a topic, a theme, or a title, something to focus it, something that you're interested in, something that you've been trying to get at and trying to write about. And then I would write a list of those categories on the left margin. And you could pick any of the categories that I gave earlier, or maybe you want to have something else that you're looking for. You might have some related to a specific project or research or something related to the theme. Again, I would add joy or affirmation, especially in this time that we're in right now. Maybe a big thing is something that you're avoiding, and you just need to address that. Either way, the categories should be random. That is the key to a Zuihitsu, is its randomness. They don't have to be connected at all. They could just be floating sentences, floating phrases, and so on. And then eventually you'll pick them up and start to write the poem. Lastly, write feverishly. Write without stopping. I would put, sometimes I put a time on how long I want to do the Zuihitsu. Sometimes I put a sentence length. Like I said, I need to be reminded to write short. And so I'll even tell myself only write one word and write 3 words here, and so on and so on. Here is a topic that we would do. So let's practice this. For those of you who may or may not know, this is Kendrick Lamar, and you don't need to know who he is. You don't need to know his music. You just need to look at his photo for a second. And let me walk you through this first Zuihitsu. Feel free to pause this at any time. Feel free to rewind it, and let's begin. One sentence that is a song lyric. Could be his or anyone else's. 3 sentences on Compton. Maybe you've never been to Compton, maybe 3 sentences on things you know or don't know about Compton. 5 sentences describing the scene on this image. A 1-word scene from a video. Again, it could be his or anyone else's. 2 words that also say Finn. 2 words from a song, his or another. 3 sentences on laughter or happiness in general. I'll let you do this at your pace, but you notice the randomness not only comes from the categories, but the randomness also comes in the length of how much I'm asking you to write. And again, this was very helpful for me because in my own search of Frederick Douglass, I really wanted to find stories about his personality. But when I was going in there, I wasn't able to find anything. So I had to be real specific about personality, like what makes personality. And when I broke it into those categories, once I went to any Douglass reading or any reading about Frederick Douglass, it really helped me to uncover things, because now instead of this one idea of personality, it might have been like a bunch of different things on personality that helped me really add dimension to what I was looking for. So again, you may or may not know who Kendrick Lamar is, and if you don't, you should fix that. But if not, I like to use things that are visual. I actually like to use mixed things. So, Kendrick Lamar is a musical artist. Here is an image of him, which has no music. It's really quiet. But as you can see in the prompts of the Zuihitsu, I'm paying attention to music, and then as it comes down, eventually we get to his own song. So I might, if I don't know the lyrics of his song, at that point you might want to research. But again, because it's only asking from 2 words, I'm not going to get stuck on that research and spend hours and hours on it. I'm just going to grab 2 words that might be really hot and that are jumping off the page. From here, I might go back and, maybe only one of these bullet point categories becomes the poem. Maybe 2 of them. Maybe they work in different poems. Okay. It's a lot like just this verbal exercising, so to speak. I have been writing a lot lately on Prince, in particular the 1999 album. And so hopefully there are people out here viewing this who are Prince fans. But again, you may or may not know Prince's music, or you might know a lot. So I know a lot about Prince. And again, that was very numbing because I knew so much. I was like, well, where do I start for writing about him? And so because of that, I had to write these categories. I stepped back and did a Zuihitsu. And I'm just going to give you the whole thing. I'll read this one a little faster, but feel free to do this one as well. Prince categories. 1-sentence song lyric. 3 sentences on Minneapolis. 5 sentences, scene regarding the statement, if you're free for a couple of hours. 1-word scene from a video. 2 words that also say smoke. 2 words from a song, his or another. 3 sentences on 1999 in general, either the year or the album. So again, here you can see I'm taking a musical artist, so the song lyrics are there. But I think with Prince, because I knew so much about him, I just needed to slow it down. I needed to slow my thinking down to really focus on Prince, and in particular this album, 1999. And it was extremely helpful. I did about 2 or 3 Zuihitsus because there's some other things that once I did this that were triggered by it, and I mean triggered by it in a good way, to go and really examine Prince and to examine not just what Prince's music means to me, but how that music was really like the soundtrack of part of my life. And so it was really helpful for that. I also like to use, you notice the 2 pictures are like black and white, because I feel like my writing is going to be the thing that adds the color to this and the texture to any piece of writing that I'm going to do. So any way you can mix it up, if you are a visual person and you want to use a picture, obviously Prince is playing some music here, and so I have to recreate that sound now. I have to recreate the image that and bring that vibrancy into it. So I hope you use this Zuihitsu technique. It's really helpful. Again, it's been really helpful for me. I've noticed that when I do this in class, my students, the productivity of their poems and the quality of their poems increase. And mostly because, Zuihitsu is low stakes. You don't need any background information on the subject. All you need are those categories, which anybody can do, and be random. Anybody can be random. And I think sometimes when we have an idea of what a poem should be, or any kind of writing should be, we forget um, to allow the grace of any direction to go in because we're so geared and so focused. Well, maybe we need to break that and to find some grace and to find some surprise in our own work. You see, and you can be creative at the very beginning of this. Right at the onset, you're allowed yourself to go in any direction. And again, sometimes I forget that when I'm trying to be creative, that I can go and do anything. Invites randomness. The whole thing about Zuihitsu is to be random. You could be a narrative or non-linear writer. You could be writing at all different levels. You could teach this to kids. You could teach this to adults. You can, again, be away from a project. So it's really helpful at any level of writing that you're at. It's extremely good for research. If you're trying to write a poem or poetry book that is really centered on history and research, this technique is great because, again, it already starts to break the research down, the nonfiction work into more of a poem. And I was watching this video on Carl Phillips, and Carl Phillips said about narrative poems. He said, my problem with narrative poems is that sometimes they forget they're a poem, or prose poems sometimes forget that they're a poem. Well, Zuihitsu helps take research and create it into poems, so you are always thinking about the poem. And lastly, did I mention it was low stakes? It was really, you could go in any direction, and I'm inviting you to please share the direction that you take your own Zuihitsus in, and let's write some good poems together. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Douglas Brown. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope that it's helpful. Please stay safe wherever you are, and we're out there for you. Send us some poems. Bye-bye.